what's happening here?
So
We got a meeting?
we have a meeting. Yeah. The first one is I'm thinking to myself, maybe Phil should be up here for the first like 4 items, right? Yeah, we have a couple of planning items.
Well, the first one we're doing this one.
Yeah.
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 That would be you, wouldn't it?
It's kind of both.
Both, yeah.
It's kind of both. I mean, I'm fine staying here. I mean,
Where's Phil? Oh, there's Phil.
Yeah, Steve and Michelle are going to handle the questions. So
there's no presentation.
No. Yeah. And then maybe I'll shift over to.
All right. Barry wanted to hold things up here. Okay, can I call the Planning Works meeting to order, please? Can I have a motion to go into open session, please? Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Shantz, all in favor? That's carried. Any pecuniary interest to declare? Seeing none. Okay, we're going to go to item 6.1 on page 35 of the open agenda. We do have a delegation here to speak to this particular matter, so we're going to get this one out of the way first. There is no staff presentation on this, but staff are prepared to answer any of your questions, and we'll have the delegation first, and then we'll have a discussion on the matter. So, Mr. Marshall, or Morning.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Greg Priamo. I'm with the planning firm of Zelenka Priamo Limited. Also with me today are members from WSP, our traffic consultants, and One Properties, the proponent for this development. We thank you for the opportunity to address the committee a second time. We've had an opportunity to undertake the measures that were last asked of us at the last meeting, and staff have provided their report. We've been through the report. We acknowledge their comments. I'm not going to take committee through the staff report. I'm sure you've all had a chance to look at it. Our view is at this point that the importance of our request continues to be paramount to the development of the property. just as a bit of a we're at the back of the presentation here, sorry. So if the committee will recall, this is a high-intensity mixed-use development. Effectively, component parts are about 500 residential units, about 80,000 square feet of commercial, and about 50,000 square feet of office that have all been integrated into a development consistent with the intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw in the City of Kitchener. As you're aware, Kitchener Council approved this development. The matter has been appealed to the Local Planning Appeals Tribunal, but we are hopeful that the matter will ultimately be approved. What we have been discussing, of course, is the prospect of access. We have put forward a proposal for a signalized intersection. We had worked with regional staff with respect to the installation of a roundabout, which would have worked well with our project, but due to land area and design considerations, that opportunity doesn't exist today. And so we put forward the proposal of a signalized intersection. This is imperative for our development given the mixed-use nature, and we think for all the modes of transportation that are going to arise from this development, this is the best access option available today. Having regard for the staff concerns, we've tried to eliminate the risk proposition from this access arrangement by putting forward the proposal to some of this will come through the WSP presentation. So this is our proposal. One properties will pay 100% of the costs related to the installation of the proposed signal, so there's no cost to the region. One properties will provide 100% of the funds necessary to remove the signal and construct a roundabout in its place, should in the future it be determined to be necessary or desirable. And certainly in the interim, it will present an opportunity to allow the access to operate, and we can determine the appropriateness of its function. So in the fullness of time, the objectives of the region can still be met, and we're putting up all of the money necessary to ensure that. So we're hoping that gives regional council some comfort, and at the same time allow us to proceed with this development. As we pointed out previously, because of the anchor uses that will drive the value of this property and the function of this property, those core users will not come to this site unless this full access arrangement is provided, either by way of a signalized intersection or a roundabout. So that being said, I think there was some additional analysis provided by regional staff with respect to the traffic component, and I'm going to ask Jim from WSP to come up and speak to that. But suffice to say, we're hopeful that the committee will see the merit in our proposal today and move forward with a recommendation to allow for the signalized intersection. I'll come back up with a few conclusion statements after Jim is done and answer any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, councillors. Sorry for all the back and forth with the slides here, but let me just back up one bit. Okay, so as you may remember, our primary objective with the transportation assessment was to provide a suitable multimodal access for the development. I think with the emphasis on multimodal, we're trying to accommodate not just cars, but pedestrians and cyclists, given the proposed development that's planned to occur, not just on the site, but around the site and across the road as well. So the foundational assessment that we were working with is that an all moves access is required to construct the development on Bleams Road. And so to test that hypothesis, we did two studies, the transportation impact study and the intersection control study at the request of staff. So the transportation impact study identified that the south access on Bleams is the main desire line for all the modes, for the pedestrians, cyclists, transit riders, and vehicles. It's also the prime access for both the residential component and the anchor commercial tenant. And what we found is that having a traffic signal at the location would really be the optimal way to both accommodate vehicular access, but accommodate pedestrians and cyclists crossing as well. And we are talking a not inconsequential number of trips. During the PM peak hour, it's about 700 plus vehicular trips going in and out of the site via this access. So, you know, some control obviously is needed there to provide for both southbound and northbound left turns. In terms of the technical analysis of the traffic signal, we did assess the traffic signal using the standard warrant as per the region's traffic impact assessment guidelines, and it meets that warrant using the first of two approaches listed in the Ontario Traffic Manual. We've used that approach in similar studies across the province. So we do think the traffic signal is benefited, and it's also warranted both for vehicles and needed for pedestrians. We've also considered the impact on the environmental assessment. We think the environmental assessment report for Bleams Road would not be affected. Changing one intersection along that 3-kilometre corridor is not really considered a significant change to the EA. It would require a bit of change to the design drawings, but overall not a significant impact. And as Mr. Priamo noted, the developer is willing to pay the costs of the intersection construction. So just to summarize the transportation assessment, we believe that a traffic signal is the best solution for crossing the street there. It's warranted, and the developer has agreed to pay for the construction of the signal. The environmental assessment would not be affected, and we think the traffic signal would have significant benefit, providing a controlled crossing for pedestrians, cyclists, and for transit riders when the transit stops are implemented there. And it does, at a higher level, support city building by really putting the focus on people and the accommodation of their mobility in this area. So at that point, I'm going to turn it back to either Greg or Jeff.
Good morning, Chair, Councillors. Jeff Marshall with One Properties. Thank you for again listening to our presentation. Again, just to sum up, if I could go back, our proposal is to fully pay for the proposed traffic signal, as well as fully pay for the concept that Greg already discussed, which would be to remove that signal in the future and pay for a roundabout on a center-aligned basis. We would be willing to convey the lands required for that on our property, again, on that center line basis. So in summary, I think we've shown how critical it is for this project to make it viable. This is a big piece to the project, and quite honestly, we're looking for your support and really looking forward to moving forward with this project. There are some notes in the report about the LPAT appeal, but we are confident that that is going to be dealt with swiftly coming in the spring. So hopefully we can just move forward with this item today. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Marshall. I have one question so far. Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Jeff, I think you can answer this. Just with regard to the possibility of paying to have the roundabout installed if in future it proves necessary. How do you see the decision being made to determine that it's necessary? What role would you have?
It would be based on the region's future negotiations, I think, with the adjacent property owner, and we would be dealing with it at that time. I think there is still a future site plan approval required by the adjacent property owner as well, and that item could be coordinated at that time.
Okay, so based on planning rather than any incidents happening at
no, I don't think it's actually a technical calculation by the traffic impact study. It's more of a land requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Strickland.
Mr. Chairman, nothing for the delegation. I'd just like to deal with the matter, if I may.
I just want to get any questions to the delegation. I don't have any other questions, Mr. Marshall, so thank you very much for the now, do you want to deal with the matter, or there may be some questions to staff first? Or?
Well, sure. Questions to staff, but I think from my perspective, I would propose a motion to move this forward.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Galloway. My question actually is through you, and Ms. Arnold, I don't know if you're the right person to ask. Can you just talk about this? It feels like a generous offer. How is the cost negotiated, and how is the future roundabout expense? Do you have experience with this? Like, how would this unfold? It's maybe something I should have asked Jeff.
Through you, Chair Galloway. So this is a controlled intersection that would be outside of the regional road network. So in terms of who pays, it would be the adjacent property owner. So there would be a number of elements of expense involved, including the land requirements, which would have to be determined. I gather they would encompass more lands than just the lands that this particular property owner owns, and then the capital costs of the improvements themselves. So we have done. It's hard for me to even think of a previous example where we have charged to the property owner for the expense for essentially an access improvement, but it certainly is something that is within the realm of possibility, but it's completely outside of, for example, the region to pay for that in terms of development charges or in any other way.
And I understand that. So I guess a signalized traffic light is generally costs X, and that's sort of what we would negotiate? Like, who decides what the price is, or do we just do the calculation and then one property pays it?
So similar, I'm going to also look to Mr. Vandekere, but similar, I gather, to any improvements that are at a developer's expense, there'd typically be a cost estimate generated, an agreement signed, a letter of credit provided for that cost estimate, and then the obligation under the contract to provide any additional funds that might be required once the work's eventually tendered and constructed that the developer would have to top up. But that would, I think, looking to Mr. Vandekere, that would be the...
He's nodding vigorously, so I think you got it right.
That would be the process.
Thank you.
So my question, I think, is along the same lines, is how do we secure those conditions? Would that be part of an agreement? How would we normally secure those conditions? I mean, normally we would be dealing with signals or one particular project, but we're actually considering here two projects, one to be immediate and then one potentially in the future. We can do that legally. We can somehow or another consummate that arrangement.
So this particular property owner is currently seeking site plan approval under the Planning Act. And under the Planning Act, there is authority for conditions, including an agreement dealing with issues related to the development, which would include access. And a signalized intersection would be related to access to the development. The agreement would provide for whatever improvements are imposed as a condition, which might include signalization of their access, and that gets registered on title to those lands. So that's a binding obligation of the property owner.
Okay, so it can be consummated. Okay, Councillor Strickland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the questions. And we have done this kind of thing with developers in the past. For example, the signal at the Canadian Tire Plaza, for lack of more accurate terminology, at Ira Needles and Herb Street. We also had the developer pay for the interchange at Highway 85 and King Street for the farmers market. So we have done these kinds of deals in the past. So I think with respect to this situation, obviously the developer is very keen on having a signalized intersection in order to proceed with executing the agreements for the lease and operation of the property. And it is a significant development. We're also talking about not only commercial development, but a few hundred housing units, which is something that we need in our community as well. So I think the proposal the developers put in front of us is quite fair. I also understand staff's concern about unwarranted signals and understand staff's position with respect to that. But sometimes I think that as a council, we need to look at the totality of the situation before us. In this case, I think it's quite fair if the developer is going to pay 100% of the traffic signal, 100% of funds necessary to remove the signal, construct a roundabout if necessary. That's a very fair offer, and they'll also convey the land to construct the roundabout if necessary. So what I'd be prepared to do, Mr. Chairman, is move that recommendation as printed there on our screens, and add that subject to the execution of an appropriate agreement between the developer and the region.
Okay, Councillor Urbanovic.
Well, I will second that, but I would just maybe ask whether it'd be friendly to also add that it's subject to the resolution of the LPAT.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Yeah. Okay, so that's friendly. So I will second it. Now, as you noted, Mr. Chair, I think somebody noted in the process was this is a project that was approved wholeheartedly by Kitchener Council. I think when Kitchener Council considered it, one of the strongest aspects of it was that it really is one of our first examples of suburban density. I mean, we've certainly seen lots of density building up along the LRT line and in our urban cores, but this is an example of suburban density playing out and in a good urban design. And so I think this is a good balance between all the various issues that we're dealing with, allowing the project to move forward, but ultimately allowing for a permanent solution that's consistent with what we're also hearing from our staff.
Okay, and have no other speakers. I will be supporting this. I think the thing that convinced me is that the ultimate configuration of a roundabout is really the solution, and that this developer is willing to pay for that in the future. And the adjacent landowner may at some point in time join in on that. They may or may not, but we'll fullness of time will certainly determine that. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, thank you. That'll be subject to Council's confirmation next Wednesday evening. Pretty well everybody is here. So no presentation is required, but if you want to be here, Mr. Marshall, that'd be fine. Okay, we'll go back to the agenda then, the consent agenda. Is there any item under the consent agenda that anybody wishes to take from the consent agenda and ask questions or speak separately to?
Here are some results from a search.
I don't know where that came from. Can somebody move the consent agenda then? Councillor Erb? Councillor Nowak? All in favor? That's carried. Okay, then to the regular agenda. The first or the next item is the response to the province consultation document on increasing housing supply, page 54 of your agenda. There is no presentation on this. There is a recommendation, however. Any questions in regards to this report? If not, someone wish to move it? Councillor Clark, Councillor Jowett, all in favor? That's carried. The next item is the Grand River Transit proposed ION integrated transit network, and there is a staff presentation on this. This is a major undertaking, and we thank staff for all the work that's gone into this. Was to have happened a few years ago, but here we are today. So, Mr. Sakutin.
Express lines provide high frequency service, high level amenities, shelters, and real-time stop. As we implemented each express line, we realigned local routes to be more direct, and as a result, nearly every local route in KW has been changed over that time period. Thank you. So the changes will continue in 2019. Over 25 routes will be changed to be realigned to connect directly with LRT stations. And because ION LRT is going to replace the 200 I Express as well as Route 7 branches to the University of Waterloo, we have the opportunity to redeploy 68,000 hours to implement this new network, which means we're going to improve frequency of service on 19 routes and increase the span of service on 16 routes. So it's a significant improvement in the quality of service that we'll be offering. An example of how this realignment occurs is downtown Kitchener. So today we have all the routes converging at Charles Street's terminal where passenger transfers occur. With light rail, the transfers will occur at each station, primarily the Frederick, Queen Station, and Central Station, and to a lesser degree, the Kitchener City Hall Station and Victoria Park Station. So it's quite evident in downtown Kitchener that we're moving away from a radial system to more of a distributed grid system. With the new network and LRT, we've identified the need for some new passenger facilities, as well as some passenger facilities that are no longer important to the network. So we mentioned Charles Street. That facility will be less important with implementation of light rail, and we have a transition plan with staff looking at ways of phasing out Charles Street. Other locations that would be decommissioned include the Highland Hills Mall facility at Fisher Hallman and Highland, where today only one route goes in there, and as well as the Forest Glen Plaza facility in Southwest Kitchener, where now the focal point will be the LRT station on Block Line in Cortland. New passenger facilities that we're currently planning and constructing include the UW station, which we anticipate to be completed by September of next year. The Sunrise Center, which helps restructuring Southwest Kitchener, that's anticipated with a spring construction of this year and to be completed within a couple of months. The Fairway Station transit passenger facility is underway and will be fully completed by April of this year. And Conestoga College, a new transit passenger facility, we anticipate later this fall. So with the significant changes that existing new passengers will be experiencing, we're developed a robust communication plan. Certainly before the launch, we're going to do the traditional media outreach, but also there's going to be a strong presence of staff at key locations. For example, we'll be at Forest Glen Plaza explaining where the transfers would occur and how the routes change for people that would have to then transfer at Block Line Station. That's one example. We've also have a new online trip planner that will be coming online in March. This will allow folks to plan their trip and see how the new network with light rail works for them. And we think this will be a good tool to hear back from customers on how the new network works for them, and gives us an opportunity to really find out how their trip is changing, and it'll be good for even future planning. We're also opening a new GRT customer service center in downtown Kitchener near the Frederick Station, and that'll help with the transition from Charles Street and in terms of helping even with customer information and obtaining the new fare products with the EasyGo fare card. And of course, even after launch day, we are planning to be present on site at as many key locations as we can to really help with that transition, because we realize it's not a one-day transition. It's going to be a long period, as well as travel training to particular community groups or seniors. We'll certainly have a presence to continue that to make the new network more understandable. Also, building the transit network continues in the next couple of years. We have plans for a new I-Express line, the 206 Coronation, which is shown in yellow there, that's traveling from Fairway Station to Southwest Galt, and that'll be supported with some local route realignments. That's, of course, subject to 2019 budget approval. And in 2020, we're also planning to extend the 200 ION bus to the South Cambridge Shopping Center, along with realignment of routes in East Galt. And that's the presentation.
Okay, thanks, John. We have a number of questions. Councillor Kiefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thanks for the presentation. As I understand it from what we've just gone through, there's no immediate changes for the Cambridge area in the transit side. And the last slide you had there, I think you indicated 2019, 2020. Is that it?
Well, subject to, we have a budget issue paper for also for the Coastal College UPass, and there are considerable improvements to routes that connect Cambridge to the college. So we anticipate that those will be some important changes for us.
And what about any changes in terms of current bus routes in Cambridge, for instance? I think you were looking at the Preston area. Maybe not.
Yeah, so for the 2019 service expansion with a 206 I Express, yes, there'll be changes in South West Gulf as well as in Preston and the Cambridge Business Park. So that's subject to the budget approval.
Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you. My question has to do with the new trip planner. I wasn't aware that was coming. That's interesting. How will that differ from our current system? Will it be, has it been beta tested? Do we have focus groups working on it? I hear, and I tend to agree myself, that our current system is a little complicated, and with the change of names of some of our stops, I think that's thrown people off a bit, and I'm wondering how this will be better.
Yes, so the new trip planner is now being beta tested internally, but our intent is to get it out to our email user group to make them aware of it. It's available for them to use it, give us feedback, and then launch it publicly in March. Well, it's I don't understand the technicalities, but it's an open source tool that we have a couple of developers that have been helping us with. So it's simply another platform.
Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you. I'll pick up on the trip planner part. One of the things that I see with the frequency of service that we've added, the frequency of service almost eliminates the need for a trip planner. Once you know your route, you really don't need to use a trip planner because you just go there and you're plus or minus a few minutes from service. So I'm just wondering how that will work, because it's the frequency is so frequent that you really don't need the trip planner part of it.
Yeah, for sure. I think for some riders that have one route that takes them where they want to go and it's frequent, that's the best of all worlds, particularly now that we're intensifying along major corridors. That's a more common occurrence. However, with the network moving towards the grid, travel opportunities increase. So we're with one transfer, whether it's to rail or bus to bus, you get to many more destinations than what you could have before. So to understand that and to understand how that could work for you, that's where the trip planner will become very valuable.
And you mentioned transfers, the EasyGo card. What's sort of the timeline for that general availability of the EasyGo card for everyone?
Well, so today, like half our riders are tapping. So all the university with the passes, it's compatible with our system, as well as the college versus their card when they purchase a semester pass is valid, and we have some beta testers and the affordability pass. But to the general public, I think we're looking at roughly April to start that official launch.
Okay, and then on the change, converting to the grid network, is this an overnight change? Like one day the LRT's not running, the next day the LRT's running, and every bus route is changed, or how will that work?
Well, so we have been changing since 2011, where the I-Express lines really are your foundation that connect with LRT. So for them, the change will be traveling into the university to get close to the train station. That's the type of change for the I-Express line. So not significant, but enough to improve connectivity with the train. And similarly with local routes. So the most changes are in along the Central Transit Corridor because the 200 and the 7 are no longer there. So light rail has replaced a lot of that, but we've also had to redefine some of our local networks along there. And Northwest Waterloo is another good example where we've focused local routes again to connect to U of W station and the research park. So those are the kind of changes. So it's not as dramatic, perhaps as it sounds, other than it's a lot of change in terms of schedule and in terms of some realignment.
Well, I would say it does look wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks.
But John, just further to Councillor Jaworski, is it like an overnight change? Yesterday the bus went there, and tomorrow it's somewhere else, and it all changes at one time, or just go route by route? Is it exactly coordinated with the start of fare service for ION? What is the transition?
Well, I think right now we're planning for making the route changes at once. Mm-hmm. How that ties in with ION, I think, is still under discussion.
Peter.
Through you, Mr. Chair. We're working with the launch committee to determine the timing exactly, but we will need to make a schedule change, an abrupt schedule change on one date to make all of this happen to align with ION service. So the timing of the launch and this period that runs up to the schedule change for GRT hasn't been determined, but we will need to pick a date and a time to launch that service and move it into operation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Strickland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to really thank staff. I know John had mentioned that this has been in the works since 2011, but having been involved with 3 master/business plans, I think it's been contemplated much earlier than 2011 in terms of moving from a traditional hub and spoke model to more of a grid system connected to the ION, and really delivering a truly modern transportation system for our region. So there's still some work ahead of us, but this is something that's taken a long time to get us where we are today, and I just like to compliment staff on all their work and persistence in managing this forward, and the innumerable issue papers related to creating an integrated grid-like transit system. So thank you for that. My question is on the decommissioning, as you put it, on the existing station, so particularly on Charles Street. So do we own that land at Charles Street? I think we do, and so it's probably premature to think about what our plans are for that. But in terms of services, will GoBus, Greyhound still originate? Will there be a kiosk there at Charles Street? We'll have a lease arrangement with those service providers?
These are the items that right now we're working ourselves through. As there's an interdepartmental team that are dealing with these issues. So we don't have the answers now, but we are working at it.
Okay, so we'll have to have answers pretty quickly this spring.
Yes.
Right. Well, my hope would be that, that Greyhound and Go service is still fairly well used out of Charles Street. So my hope that we will be able to find some accommodation, even if on an interim basis, until our plans for the use of that property are finalized.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then also about Forest Glen, that transit, I don't think you call it a terminal maybe, but that has been in place, same with Highland Hills for a number of years. I'm assuming those malls will still be serviced by the realignment of the routes?
Oh, absolutely. Highland, we have 2 express lines. We've spoken with the owners. They're very well served, and the stops near that mall are very well used.
And similarly for Forest Glen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Councillor Urbanovic.
Well, thank you very much, and I too want to thank staff for the great work that has been done on this. Just a couple of questions that haven't been asked yet, and one is in a follow-up to what Sean just talked about, and it has to do with Charles Street Terminal. In fact, the whole LRT model, if I remember correctly, contemplated that at some point those lands will be sold as part of the financial model. Is that not my understanding?
No, I don't think so. Not my understanding. I can comment briefly and maybe ask Craig. No. No, it's not included in the financial model. Sale and proceeds of the Charles Street terminal lands aren't included in the financing funding model for LRT. But I think we've recognized all along that once we move to a grid system, over time, we likely won't need, for sure we won't need all of Charles Street, and we may not need any of Charles Street. So as John said, that's still a work in progress. GO Bus, there are GO Bus connections there, but GO has also changed how they operate over the last few years. So there's also GO Bus connections, like significant GO Bus connections at the university, at Sports World, some at Charles Street. So we're fully aware we need to keep good GO Bus connections, good Greyhound connections, and look at the long-term future of Charles Street. So there's still lots of work to be done.
So I guess just on that, I would certainly urge that we have some conversations with the City of Kitchener, because as you know, we've got the piece of property across the street from there, the old post office, and part of our timing on that has been contemplated on what the region might do so that we have a comprehensive look. Plus, I believe the parking lot on that block is still owned by the city. It wasn't part of the transfer when Region took over transit back in 2000 or whenever that was. So that'll need to be part of the conversation as well at that time. In the report, you talk about the late night loop and the university loop, and both of those being discontinued in lieu of improved late night service on a number of routes. I'm just wondering what are we contemplating in terms of the ION and sort of any of the main feeder routes into it? Because I know one of the things certainly that we've heard from the student population is they're looking, from those involved in the entertainment in restaurant sector, they're looking forward to hopefully the ION running late and giving people access to both uptown and downtown from where they're living on and off campus.
Yes, so through Chair Galloway, we've planned for some later service. On ION, I don't have the times right at my fingertips, but I know it's after midnight, and some of the routes that go through the universities and the entertainment areas, particularly where we're seeing more and more residential, we're looking at routes traveling well past midnight, 1 o'clock. Again, I don't have those at my fingertip, but it's an issue that we're aware of, and we've been looking at the ridership demand on those services and trying to get a sense of where people are coming from and going to. And I think we've got a good first shot at accommodating with the late night service we're planning. However, we'll be monitoring and certainly can respond, when it gets implemented and we get feedback.
And so just in that regard, I think if you can share that information with us, by email at some point, sure. that would be great. I do think it's, and it's great that we've been doing some monitoring work. I suspect that it's hard to monitor right now because it simply doesn't exist in the same degree as I think it will be once the ION is up and running. And so I think we need to be open, particularly on weekends, maybe to, like Friday or Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, looking at maybe running a little later on, at least along the ION route, potentially going forward. And taking it from there. The last point I'll raise, and it's one that I know Mayors Jaworski, myself, and Chair Redmond have been exploring, and Chair Redmond recently sent an email to staff around, and it was, as we're looking at this rejigging of routes, is this an opportunity to look at serving the Sikh temple on Highland Road? We've had numerous requests about trying to get access there on Sunday mornings in particular. And is this an opportunity, as this rejigging happens, to try to accommodate that?
Yes, so we've evaluated, and I think sort of we have sort of in the short term, one of the things that we're looking at is there's Route 77, which goes from New Hamburg, Baden, and the Boardwalk, is in the outbound direction, looking at getting service into the Temple site in the outbound. And so that's something we're going to explore with the owner to see if we can have a physically able to maneuver. These are the smaller vehicles, so it should be easier. In the other direction is very challenging. There's no place to put a stop, and we wouldn't want the vehicle to try to make a left turn out of there. But from what we heard, that would provide some benefit to folks going to the Temple. So we're going to initiate those discussions and see if we can make that happen.
Great. Thank you very much.
Councillor Armstrong.
A couple of items, and touching on that, I'm glad to see that there is something occurring with the Temple that they finally, it was a couple of years ago that they approached me about it, and I gave them the names to call and say that they were interested in having a stop in their parking lot. That's good to see. The other thing I mentioned is that I've had a couple people mention that, I tell people, it's a great system that we have. You pay your fare in downtown New Hamburg, and you can go anywhere in the region, including Cambridge. But the unfortunate part is that by the time they are about to get on their last bus in Cambridge, their transfer is expired. So I just think that I just wanted to bring that to people's attention, that that's something that needs to be addressed. I'm sure it can be with the tap cards or something, that when somebody gets on in New Hamburg and they're trying to catch the last bus in Cambridge, they're not having to pay their fare again.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. I notice in Appendix A that there's some changes to Route 19, and I know we spent some time talking about those. Is this going to affect Route 21? Are those changes going to affect Route 21? I know there's a budget issue paper to increase service on 21.
No, we saw them as complementary services, and the 19 comes up the Weber corridor, and we saw it as a benefit. We've heard from customers that they like that link, and I think it's separate from the 21 improvements.
Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to check that. I think it's a good addition. Thank you.
Councillor Kiefer.
Thank you, Chair Galloway. John, I'm not sure if you can answer this one, but with regards to Greyhound service out of Cambridge, I know they operate on Industrial Road. At one point in time, many years ago when I was still on City Council, Greyhound was going to look for a location in Cambridge to build something or go into a building. Have you heard anything more about that, or does that tie into any of the transportation network for the region?
No, we haven't. I haven't heard anything from Greyhound in regards to that. It's certainly something we'd be willing to explore with them and communicate with, but no, they haven't contacted us as far as I know.
We are aware they're operating out of Industrial Road, though, right?
Yeah.
No, thanks.
Okay, no more questions. I had a couple, though. What happens to King Street, John? Are there no buses on King Street once ION starts? Or there will remain to be buses on King Street?
Yeah, so Route 7, which is primarily the route on King Street. So today, it's a very complicated route where there's 6 branches, and the 2 that go to the university are going to be replaced by Anya. So there'll be one Route 7 that travels from Conestoga Station down King Street right to Fairway Station. And so that route will be very simplified, and it'll serve the stops in between the ION stations along King. So, and it will be a higher frequency route given the demand, particularly in north of the Uptown Waterloo area.
So can you estimate like half the number of buses on King Street after ION service starts, or the same number of buses, or can
there's going to be less going to the university. So in total, there's less, but it'll be on one line. So the frequency, we are planning for 15-minute service on King Street, supplemented with buses in between Uptown and Conestoga Station, because we know that that's a high demand area, and ION doesn't really serve some of those intermediate stops north of the Uptown along King. So there it'll be in the peak 7.5, but the full breadth of King Street will be 15 minutes all day.
Okay. The EasyGo card, one of the concerns people expressed, I think if I have this correct, is that you can't find out what your balance is on the card. Does that make sense at the readers?
That may have been an early issue. I think that's
has that been resolved?
But yeah, we can look into it. I thought we had resolved it, but
okay, that's great if it's been resolved. The other thing is the Charles Street terminal, not necessarily germane to this conversation, other than that it's likely going to become surplus, or parts of it, large part of it might become surplus, and what its future use may be, and then of course with Councillor Urbanovic's observation as well of adjacent city lands. And of course that property will be worth a lot of money given today's values in the area, but it's certainly my view that it's a great candidate site for affordable housing and to deal with some of the gentrification issues that we've experienced with ION. I would just throw that out there. So there is a recommendation. Oh, Councillor Erb, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Galloway. I had always understood, and part of this is probably my time not being around here, that there would be eventually no bus service on King Street. So that is going to be at 15-minute intervals. Is that correct? So the current situation and the long-term ability to change, if you get behind a bus on King Street in Waterloo and want to get to the other end of Kitchener, the possibility of passing those buses with any off-turns or is pretty well impossible.
Yeah, it's sort of, you got the track curb on one side and you got the sidewalk curb on the other. So it is challenging. Now, we have rationalized the bus stops on King, so they're not as close as they used to be. So that occurrence should be less than it was in the past.
So if I may, the stops that are currently in use will be the same ones, or there'll be less?
They're the same ones, yeah.
The same, so there's nothing. Okay.
Okay. Recommendation on page 74. Somebody wish, Councillor Urbanovic, Councillor Strickland. Any discussion on that? All in favor? And that's carried. I too want to thank staff for this. This is, of course, the implementation is still to be done, and that's going to be a huge job. But getting here has been a huge job. And I think the staff have done a great job in creating this grid network, minimizing some of the disruptions. I mean, we all got a few calls from people who didn't like their particular route being changed. But really, on balance, considering the major changes that this is going to cause, it's gone particularly smoothly. And I know that there's been a lot of time and effort put into communication, open houses, and trying to deal with people's concerns. I think staff have done an admirable job in that, and has kept the emails and the phone calls to a minimum. Change is always difficult, particularly people on their travel. They want to go to the same route, the same stops. Same with people in cars. They don't want to have to change how they go about things. And ION has been a bit of a disruptor in that regard for motorists and transit users as well, to a certain extent. So a job well done. The next item is the road safety education campaign. There is a staff presentation on this. Mr. Henderson.
Good morning through you, Chair Galloway and members of council. I'm here to introduce the 2019 Road Safety Education Campaign. Before I get into the nuts and bolts of the education campaign, I wanted to thank a few people who have put in a lot of effort and contributions towards this education campaign. I think you'll be pretty impressed by the comprehensiveness of this campaign. So just to acknowledge a few people, regional staff members in particular, Satinder Bahaya, Mike Jones, Catherine McCall. We had a number of volunteers on our regional staff team volunteer some time to participate in the production of some videos that you'll see today. I would like to acknowledge Danny Stock from eSolutions, our consultant who's been very helpful in developing the communication plan and primarily responsible for all the production materials. Danny's sitting up in the audience here. As well as I want to thank our members of Waterloo Regional Police Services, Staff Sergeant Michael Hensberger, who's here today to co-present with me, as well as Inspector Sharon Havel, who have participated on our project team. So to start off our campaign theme, our slogan is Safe Roads Waterloo Region, with logos of the Region of Waterloo, of course, and Waterloo Regional Police. Our goal is in line with the Vision Zero movement that's abroad in lots of transportation agencies across North America, but our goal is primarily to reduce deaths and injuries caused by collisions on our roadways. Again, in line with the Vision Zero plan, everyone has a part to play to make our roads safer, including drivers, pedestrians, cyclists, government agencies, as well as our traffic enforcement branches. In mining through our collision data, we mine through it to extract where people are typically getting injured most frequently on our roads, with one exception, but I'll go through the three that are primarily injury-based issues. Our rear-end collisions at intersections are most common, and most common at signalized intersections that will result in injuries to passengers in motor vehicles. And cyclist collisions are primarily happening as well as signalized intersections, in particular at crosswalks, and as well pedestrian collisions. You probably heard this story in the past or past presentations, but pedestrian collisions are very common at traffic signals, in particular at crosswalks when pedestrians are walking through with the right-of-way. And continuing our long-term efforts, not necessarily an injury-based issue, but more of a commitment to our long-term education plans. With roundabouts, we included roundabout collisions in our campaign theme, in particular to address what you've heard in the past, fail-to-yield type collision behaviors. Okay, so you may have been aware that we've participated in some community engagement and undertaken some surveys. We have engaged the public through a pre-campaign survey, trying to establish a baseline for understanding how well the public perceives road safety in the region, and to identify how aware they are of what type of collisions lead to injuries on regional roads. So this has really helped us establish a baseline for that information. We've had really good engagement. We've had over 1,800 participants take the survey, and we've had over 2,500 people actually aware of the survey and the campaign. So this is, we've created a website for the Road Safety Education Campaign. It's embedded within the region's website. It will be used to provide a lot of information on the key campaign themes. Some of the campaign tactics that project team were contributed to and producing included a microsite, which is Safe Roads Waterloo Region, or saferoadswr.com. That will take you to the website. There's all sorts of social media material that will be distributed to the public. It seems that that's really the key piece of the puzzle in getting the message out to members of the public in Waterloo Region. We've produced some videos that will be displayed on social media channels, through YouTube, through Twitter, through things like that. We'll be producing some radio ads as well. An interesting tactic that we came up with was digital kiosks. There's going to be 5 or 6 kiosks that will be interactive through on-screen digital displays. We haven't actually established the locations where we'll be placing those, but we'll put them in high traffic areas that will attract attention to getting the information out. Some traditional means like postcards and print materials will be produced. Transit ads, we're planning to place, use our transit buses and advertising mechanisms through that channel, as well as newspaper and online ads. So this is just the front page of the microsite. It will be quite interactive and connected to social media channels. Again, just another example. One of the interesting messages or key messages that will form part of this campaign theme is to take an extra second. All it takes is 1 second to make a big difference. And you'll see that theme throughout all the campaign tactics. As well as we'll be doing a pledge campaign as well for people to make changes, to pledge that they'll change their habits and behaviors to make our roads safer. Here's just a couple examples of some social media campaign posts, safety tips, and video links to the website. We'll be providing stats like, for example, 49% of rear-end collisions happen at intersections. And just another example, give a second to make a safer journey. So right now I want to take an opportunity to give you a sneak preview on a video that we've produced. It's still being refined, it's not finalized, but this is giving a sneak campaign or a sneak preview to what you're going to expect from this campaign.
There just aren't enough hours in the day. We have people who need us. We have goals to reach. And we have places to go. But none of this matters if we put our...
That's not me.
Some days, it feels like there just aren't enough hours in the day. We have people who need us. We have goals to reach. And we have places to go. But none of this matters if we put ourselves and others in danger. All it takes is 1 split second to change everything. Rear-end collisions are the most common collision type on our roads. When you're following another vehicle, take an extra second. Give yourself enough space to stop and help give everyone a safe journey. We all share the region's roads. Let's get there safely together.
So that's a really good example of how the primary message of this campaign theme is to take an extra second, just to remind people that that's all it takes in order to make some good decisions on our roads and to protect other road users. So there's just a picture of our kiosks that we're going to be putting out throughout the region. Again, some quizzes and a very interactive mechanism to engage the public. postcards and print material examples, and again, some more information-based material to provide stats to the public to get them aware of what's happening on our roadways and for them to enact change. Just an example, as I mentioned before, transit advertising will be advertising on the buses and at bus stops. And again, the traditional means through the newspaper. One of the differences between this campaign and our last campaigns is this campaign is focused on specific timelines throughout the year to target different campaign messages. So there's just a timeline where we'll be focusing our efforts on the different themes throughout the campaign. So we're starting off with rear-end collisions in February. And something else that is always difficult, but we're trying our best to do this year, is to measure the effectiveness of our campaign. Again, we did a pre-campaign survey that over 1,800 people have participated in, and we'll be measuring, we'll be doing similar surveys throughout the campaign term. We'll have mid and ending campaign surveys where we'll try and see if there's improvements in people's understanding of road safety in the region. So another aspect of this campaign and something that we really haven't done well over past campaigns is established a better collaboration with our Waterloo Regional Police Services, and I'm glad Mike Hinsberger is here today to talk about his part they're going to play in this campaign theme. And without further ado, I'll introduce Mike.
Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. Thank you, Bob. Chair Galloway and council members, it's a pleasure to be here to speak with you, and hopefully can put a little light on some of the police involvement with the region in this campaign. Just to give you a little bit of an overview, as many of you know, I head up the traffic services unit with the regional police. And to kind of go through some of what we do, I think a lot of you are familiar with us already, but in addition to some of the major collision reconstruction investigation that we're involved with, we also take a leadership role with road safety and enforcement campaigns that we're involved in. And some of the collaboration that Bob referred to is what can we do from an enforcement standpoint to assist? And part of that collaboration is identifying some of the top problem intersections and some of the statistics that Bob and his team have identified and collected, has identified some of the areas and problem drivers and habits that are causing collisions and some of the locations that those collisions are occurring at most frequently. Some of the other areas that we are also involved with, our newest piece of equipment is a remote piloted vehicle operation. We use that already with some of our major collisions, and we're also involved in community events, etc. So with the partnership, the campaign, and some of the identification of the peak intersections, we want to try to focus a high presence, or as high as we possibly can, as a priority at those locations. And through the visibility, through the enforcement, and through some of the social media outlets that will be highlighting what we're doing, we're hoping that awareness and visibility factor will help decrease the collisions at some of those peak intersections. We're looking at starting that in April, and to measure our effectiveness, we want to start with some of the statistics with collisions prior to the campaign starting, and we would look at it quarterly. So starting from April 1st to June, we would focus on high visibility enforcement in those areas. And again, what gets measured gets done. We want to see where we're at after that 1 quarter time period, and our hope is that the collisions will have decreased somewhat. And again, it's something that we don't know what the outcome of that's going to be, but we're hoping for the best there. Some of the high visible enforcement things that we are involved in and we're planning, obviously speed enforcement approaching some of those intersections is going to be one of the key factors. That is some of the area that's of concern, and we are going to try to work with the divisional officers as well to get a lot more speed enforcement on approach of those areas. Other things that we'll be involving ourselves with from an enforcement standpoint, cell phone enforcement. Again, when we look at some of the causes of collisions that we investigate, Bob alluded to the rear-end type collision, but the inattentive component to that rear-end collision is often involving something else going on inside the vehicle other than paying attention to the vehicle in front of them. So again, cell phone use is something we will be continuing looking at from an enforcement standpoint. Other things that are very visible, ride programs, we will be running those in and around some of those areas as well. And again, the visibility piece is what we're hoping is going to help reduce some of the collisions in those areas. So again, targeted type enforcement, seatbelts, and other things that we often do in and around the area during different campaigns, we are going to try to highlight as much as we possibly can at some of these problem intersections. Again, from a statistical standpoint, tracking the results and the number of collisions through the time periods that were there, it is hoped that we are going to be able to try to reduce and mitigate some of the collision numbers that are occurring, and hopefully reduce the injuries, et cetera, that spin out of those as well. Again, is something that we as a traffic unit are looking at spearheading, but we want to work as well with the divisional officers for that visibility piece for the enforcement that's going on, and we'll be spearheading some of the training of those officers as well in those areas. When we're looking at some of the collision types that we're seeing, again, without getting into specifics, the number of collisions have been the biggest issue that Bob and I have worked with the team to highlight, and hopefully we can try to reduce those as much as possible. And again, with an April 1st start date, we're hoping to see some of that visibility of enforcement increase. So with barring any questions you may have, I'll try to answer them for you, and that's pretty much our involvement in the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Mike. We do have some questions, though. Councillor Brbanovic.
Thanks, and thanks to both of you for being here. Just a couple quick questions. On the roundabouts, and you pointed out, the sort of the collisions that happen with pedestrians and cyclists there. Do we have any sense of, since the rules changed, I guess it's about, is it 6 months now or is it a year now since the rules changed around having to wait until the person is completely through the roundabout, which is different than a normal intersection? Have we seen a decrease in conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles since then, or not really?
I don't have any statistics, Councillor Brbanovic, but I don't know, Bob, maybe you can speak to that.
So I can tell you there's been some yielding and compliance studies done before and after the change associated with the new level 2 pedestrian crossover, and I can tell the surveys were actually undertaken by the Waterloo Record, and they did their own study, but the results from their study indicated that yielding rates are actually much better now with those signs. We've done studies in the past to determine yielding rates. And so right now, like, yielding rate compliance is up in the range of 90% on the approach to a roundabout. So that's something that we're really excited about, and what other road safety professionals are telling us in the industry is phenomenal. So.
Okay, well, that's good. Certainly good to hear. The second question I have is in regards to something subject to budget approval later this week. We're hoping to pilot in Kitchener, and that's a Dutch roundabout. Where we've got two City of Kitchener streets crossing each other. Is this something the region is open to looking at as well? Because on a regional roundabout at some point, as we understand that they tend to help as well.
So we're aware of the Dutch roundabout that the city of Kitchener is proposing, and we're wanting to get a little bit more information from staff. We're asking them some questions about it, and actually we want to learn more about it. But we're actually asking them to come to our roundabout coordination committee to learn more about the Dutch roundabout.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you. Through the chair, one of the best ways to get information out is often through children and to get to their parents. Is there any partnership here with the school boards at all?
We have already been working with the school boards to get some information out about, in particular, about bike safety and walking to school. We work in collaboration with the Safe Routes to School group that's working on developing kids' skills getting to and from school other than by a car. And we've also been going into the schools, educating kids about the benefits of bike lights and safety benefits of bike lights. So we've been working with the school boards and getting into the schools themselves with staff and doing presentations.
Yeah, I think this would be a wonderful one for the kids to pick up. And then second on the program, yeah, a lot of the information there seemed very oriented towards car drivers as opposed to all active transportation methods, right? So information oriented towards pedestrians or cyclists is, you know, it's defensive as well, not just offensive that you want to attack. So I'm just wondering if there's a part of the program that's focused more on the active transportation users.
Absolutely, yeah. We just showed one video about rear-ending motorists rear-ending each other. We have two other videos in particular that address pedestrian safety at signalized intersections as well as cycling safety at signalized intersections. Yeah.
Councillor Shantz.
Disappeared. There we go. Through you to, I'm not sure which of you. My question is about the rural settlements. So one of the biggest complaints I get in the rural settlements is people not slowing down coming into the towns. Does this address that at all? Like, are you targeting that kind of behavior, or is it just collisions at intersections?
So this particular campaign initiative, we want to try to focus on the collisions at intersections specifically. And again, it's something that we're going to sort of measure the results to see how much of an effect that we're going to have by doing that. That said, the speed in the coming into towns, etc., is another issue completely, and that is something that is an ongoing issue through our STEP program that we currently have in place. And so where we have problem areas like that, yes, we're certainly tracking the enforcement hours that we're doing through the STEP program as well. And hopefully we see some results from that. But that is separate from what this initiative is trying to accomplish.
There just seem to be, I mean, you're targeting this in a lot of different ways, and I don't know if it would be possible to, tack something in there about speed, but maybe it just doesn't fit with this program.
Well, with this one specifically, and again, I think what we're trying to do is highlight the worst intersections. And I say worst from a collision number standpoint, and see what we're able to do to try to mitigate some of the collisions that are occurring there. Certainly, the speed is a problem as well. Granted, that is something that we are working with on a daily basis, but. With this initiative, specifically working with the region, we're going to try to highlight and identify some of the problem areas and just see what exactly the results of the initiative are going to be in segments. So, 3 months at a time, and we'll try to categorize the stats that we get and how much of a reduction or how much of effect we're going to have through the initiative. So it's a little bit of a wait and see approach from us as well, because we've never tried this to work with the region in this regard, and we're going to see if we can try to bring the collision numbers down through the campaign.
Okay. Thank you. One other question, if I could, and it's about a Dutch roundabout. I've never heard of that. What's the difference?
They speak Dutch.
Just briefly.
we're still learning about the Dutch roundabout as well. We're aware of them, but my understanding, the difference between a Dutch roundabout and our regular roundabout is the design of the cycling facility around the roundabout, and potentially some differences in operation.
It accommodates cycling more, yeah. Councillor Clark.
Thank you. This isn't a question, it is a comment, though, and I think that Councillor Jaworski mentioned the fact that we're targeting 3 audiences. We're looking at pedestrians and cyclists as well as motorists. And I guess this is a heads up. I think councillors need to expect to get a little pushback on that from the some of the active transportation advocates who take the position that because the accidents are caused by the motorists, in the case, for example, of pedestrians who are crossing, in a crosswalk, then we're blaming the vulnerable road users if we provide this sort of education to them. And I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that we're taking a very pragmatic, safety-oriented position here rather than a political one, and be prepared to hear some of that.
Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, the question, either you can answer it. Do you know if there's been any push to the province to improve the driver education programs for the driver educators?
I'm not aware of anything, Councillor, on that front with respect to the educational component. I know I've gotten calls at my office with respect to some of the educational piece, what they're teaching at the driver training schools, though I'm not privy to.
Because, I've set examples about different driver eds, following a car with a driver ed sign on the top, and the only one in the car is obviously the driver trainer. And from my experience, their driving skills are questionable, and they're passing these on to their students. And I've been advocating that the province needs to pick up and improve the education for them, because defensive driving is extremely important, and I don't think they are doing that. There's a lot of impatience on the road, and I think that the proper education will help to eliminate some of that impatience on the road. And I think that's probably one of the biggest factors is people have a lack of patience in getting there. They want to be there yesterday. So hopefully that something that maybe through your affiliations with the province on both sides, that maybe that's something that could be addressed, that these people should be teaching our children how to drive and the common sense respect of being on the road with a large vehicle.
One of the areas, just on that note, that we have been involved with, and it's more from a provincial standpoint, from a committee I chair provincially in the commercial vehicle side of things, we have done presentations at the commercial driving schools there with respect to some of the problem areas that we encounter, and there's been a pretty good partnership with a couple of the colleges in and around the area that do teach commercial vehicle drivers. So again, could that flow into the passenger vehicle training, with the novice and young drivers? Absolutely, it could.
Yeah. Councillor Erb.
I apologize if this has been a conversation around the table before, which I assume it has, and it's partly, I think, related to safety and design. But have we looked at the location of the crosswalks at roundabouts, and that they would be removed further away from the crosswalk, and there'd be some opportunity for pedestrian signalization to make the drivers aware that there's a pedestrian wanting to cross?
So. Yes, historically we've discussed this issue for like quite a bit, but the main primary reasons why the crosswalks are where they are is that's where speeds are slowest in a roundabout environment. As you know, on the approach to a roundabout, you're slowing down. As you leave a roundabout, you're speeding up. And so if you start placing the crosswalks further back, you're introducing an element or a crosswalk in an environment where there's higher speeds and a greater likelihood of death if someone gets hit. We've been continually monitoring the safety benefits of roundabouts, in particular for pedestrians. And we keep concluding over and over and time again that the pedestrian environment on the roundabout is much safer than a signalized environment at a traditional intersection, and the stats are proving themselves, not only in the region of Waterloo, but internationally and abroad. We've been discussing issues of signalized control or using RFBs at roundabout crosswalks. And again, that introduces a whole level of new discussion about the effects of other crosswalks, and what you do at one crosswalk can have an effect or a detrimental effect at another crosswalk. So there's also issues of compliance, whether people will actually use a push button at a crosswalk. It also introduces an element of delay. Now you're delaying pedestrians a lot more at a roundabout. Like right now, the yield compliance is phenomenal, and the delays that pedestrians have to experience at a roundabout are really short. You start introducing other elements, and that changes.
Have you checked the incidences of accidents or anything in other jurisdictions where they are using signalization, or where the crosswalk is set back further?
Well, there's not a lot of locations in Canada or North America where they're setting crosswalks back further, and there is some roundabouts in Europe where they do that. That tends to be a historically old practice. But roundabouts are being built in Europe and internationally abroad, similar to how the region of Waterloo is building them, with crosswalks in closer, the geometry of a roundabout contributing to slower speeds at a roundabout, which are contributing to improved safety at roundabouts.
Thank you.
Okay, I have no more questions, so thanks very much, Mike and Bob. We look forward to the rollout of the communication plan. The next item is the Outdoor Water Conservation Program Update 2019. It's here for information. There is no presentation. So anybody has any questions? Staff, Steve is here, Nancy's here to answer any of your questions. Seeing none, we'll carry on. And that was the last regular item. Is there any other matters to bring to the meeting? I would note that Bill 66, Section 10, is not going forward as we had hoped, and the efforts that all municipal councils, I believe, or most municipal councils across the province and a whole number of advocacy groups seems to have the desired impact. So that was good news. Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Galloway. I was actually just going to bring up the same issue and say that it was one of the things that when I did a presentation to the Finance Committee for the province, I made a point of acknowledging how important that was to us because we rely on groundwater, and that some of the other planning changes were deeply problematic for us. So I commended the government on behalf of Regional Council because that was something we expressed real desire to have.
Okay, motion to adjourn. Councillor Clark, Councillor Kiefer, all in favor? Thank you.